Brian Stelter of CNN recently talked about Donald Trump's story pertaining to Baghdadi, saying it seems as though the story about Baghdadi whimpering and crying may have been all made up. And apparently, there's no confirmation at all that Donald Trump made the story up. There's just no confirmation that the story isn't made up. So I question why they would do this anyway. Why is it that over the past several days, when the story came out, they referred to this awful, awful man as an austere scholar? They've said he's not a coward and had to delete the tweet and backtrack. And even today, now, isn't the cycle over? They're still running a segment saying Trump made it up. He wasn't whimpering and crying. Who cares? The guy was awful. Why are they so obsessed with making every single thing about Trump bad? I kid you not. CNN talked about Donald Trump's typos today. Seriously. So I have a series of stories for you. And I want to talk about how Trump Derangement Syndrome is becoming terminal. It is an addiction and an obsession. And as these media companies relentlessly talk about how every single thing this man does is bad, they generate an audience of addicts. And what happens then when they deviate from that orange man bad narrative? Well, the addicts go through withdrawal. They get angry. They scream, "How dare you say anything positive?" And they lock themselves in a corner. So let's look at these things today. And you're going to love, I got this great stuff lined up. One story from The Spectator basically says that Jeff Zucker is Captain Ahab, desperately going after his white whale, Donald Trump, even though it's bringing about the demise of their network. Dare I say it? Trump Derangement Syndrome may be terminal. However, it may also be true that the only reason the network has survived this long is because they started selling an addiction to their audience, that you can love to hate the president. So I start you off with this first story you're looking at. U.S. economy under Trump, is it the greatest in history? They say, the reality-checked verdict. It's true, the economy has been doing well, but there have been periods where it was even stronger. So yes, we will fact-check the president when he said perhaps the greatest economy we've had in the history of our country. No, it's not the greatest. Well, Trump said perhaps. Okay, fine, but the economy is good, right? So I show you this to make a couple points. I actually have some outlets that are being fair and doing the right thing and reporting these stories accurately. And I want to mention that although there are some networks that have gone full on Moby Dick, it's not true for every single outlet. There are some that can point out, even though they want to say it's not the greatest, they're kind of making this a negative, the economy is doing really well. And that brings me to the next story I've highlighted several times. Watch Fox News. You likely think the US economy is great. MSNBC viewers, not so much. Strange, isn't it? We just read a story from the BBC, a far cry from Fox News, saying it's true, the economy is great. Maybe not the best in history, but it is great. So why then would you think the economy isn't great if you watch MSNBC? It's because several networks and outlets have adopted a Trump Derangement Syndrome model of reporting, where no matter what happens, you cannot say good things about the president. How hard is it for anybody to talk about something else? And I'll be the first to admit, I can't stand the obsession with him and even having to talk about this media in this regard. So stick around, because at the end, there will be some self-reflection on myself and my own channel, and we'll talk about this issue of shock and outrage. Now, I want to show you some graphs here. Before we do, though, make sure you check out timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There are several different ways you can help me out. The best of which, however, share this video. I'm competing with these big channels like MSNBC, Fox News, etc. And if you think I'm doing a good job sort of breaking these stories down and you want me to do it more, well, YouTube's trying to shut this down. And I'm going to say it, I predict in the coming years, channels like mine will not exist because YouTube doesn't like the controversy. The only way to counteract the throttling and censorship, and I admit it's difficult for me. I have to plan these videos out and blur things because it's news and YouTube doesn't like it. But if you share this video, it overcomes that throttling. And that means YouTube can't shut me down. It helps me grow and do what I do. Let's look at some graphs here. And before we get into the meat and potatoes of CNN's outrage reporting. Partisan spills into views on the economy. Consumer sentiment and expectations are considered important gauges for the future of the economy. A new big data survey, however, suggests that expectations may be less about economic facts and more about partisanship. Values above 100 indicate positive sentiment about the economy. And here we can see that those who disapprove of Trump think the economy is doing bad, and those who approve of Trump think the economy is doing good. That's why I showed you the BBC. The BBC is not a conservative outlet, far from it. They're criticized as having a liberal bias. So I believe allsides.com says they lean left. I could be wrong. But that just goes to show you the people who approve of Trump tend to be living in reality when it comes to the economy, at least. And why is that? The BBC is not a right-wing outlet, and nor is time.com, which I'll show you in a second. But for some reason, this view of the economy, a fact-based claim, is wrong? Check this out. If you watch MSNBC, you think the economy is bad. If you watch CNN, you think the economy is bad. And only a little bit. It's just below 100. The New York Times, Facebook, Twitter, the Wall Street Journal, and Fox News are all above 100. Those who watch Fox News, near 140. Well, I'll tell you what. This is according to a Morning Consult poll. The BBC says it. It's quite simple. The economy is doing really, really well. And that takes me now to today's big breaking story. I tweeted this. Why are they trying so hard to defend Baghdadi? What the F is wrong with the media? Quote, he was an austere scholar, not a coward, and he certainly wasn't crying. This was in response to a tweet I was quoting from Brian Stelter, where he said, all the available evidence indicates that Trump invented his claims about al-Baghdadi whimpering and crying. We shouldn't get used to this. Well, Brian responded. And I do want to make sure I extend my respect to Brian for engaging, having the conversation. I don't think Brian, I'll use the same line as for Trump. Brian's not that bad. Trump's not that bad, right? I think Brian, I'm going to be critical of him here. And I think there's some, you can criticize him. He can criticize me. It's fair. I think I appreciate his willingness to engage, though we disagree. I certainly don't think he's the worst of the worst. But I want to point out the problem here. Well, his response was, defend Baghdadi. Shame on you. What I said in the air was very clear. The country has celebrated his death. The country also expects political leaders to tell the truth. Let me stop there, and I'll bring you now to time.com. Trump had reasons to give the gruesome details, and they make it very, very simple. I was impressed when I saw this article from Time, that basically what they say is Trump is trying to break the cult of personality that is Baghdadi, to make his legacy about being a whimpering, crying coward who took the easy way out instead of fighting. It's that simple. And I think most of us get that. Trump was just insulting the guy. Do we really think that quite literally he's cowering in the corner? I mean, he was probably maybe muttering a little bit, something like that. But I know, I can see what the man is trying to do. He's trying to tear down a legacy from a dangerous, dangerous individual who everyone is happy that he's gone. And that's what Trump wanted to do. But for some reason, CNN must make sure that he is not a coward, that he was not crying. How dare you say this? And it brings me to this tweet. Nate Silver, you see, Comfortably Smug on Twitter was quoting Jamie Lee Curtis, who for some reason was angry at Trump over his language. And Nate said, it really is amazing how many libs can't even permit Trump to have one good day. No one will remember this stuff by Tuesday after U.S. forces take out perhaps the most wanted, we'll call him a bad man because YouTube's going to get mad at me for this language. So going back to this Twitter thread, that's the easiest way to put it. We understand. Time.com. They talked to people and they said, look, Trump wants to break the spell this guy has. He's not some great and glorious guy. He's an awful person. And Trump is saying this to make his legacy bad because what Trump said will go in the history books. Well, the New York Times and Brian Stelter wanted to make sure that this awful person goes down in history, I guess, is not a coward. So here's what I said. You're the Orange Man Bad Network. All Trump all the time. Trump's insulting, we'll call him a bad person. And you fact check his insult? You're bending over backwards to make this bad for Trump. To which Brian responded, Tim, the president's spokeswoman was asked about Trump's apparent made-up account. If she wanted to claim it was an insult, she could have. She didn't. As for the fact check, the NYT published the original story. Take your concerns up with those reporters. And I will. And you for not calling this out for exactly what it is. A smear without confirmation. Because the New York Times writes, the whimpering terrorist only Trump seems to have heard. They say that Trump offered a vivid account of crying and screaming in the final minutes before the end of Baghdadi. The only problem? No one else knows what he's talking about. No one? No one. You literally talked to every person everywhere on the planet and everyone involved? No. The New York Times reached out to select individuals and high-ranking personalities who you would assume would have information, and they said, I don't know what Trump is talking about. One person said it sounds like he may have made it up. Is that confirmation that Trump made it up? No. Did Trump make it up? In my honest opinion, I think Trump was being hyperbolic. I think he was exaggerating, and he was making it more colorful than it needed to be. But as we can see from the Time.com story, we all kind of get why he's doing it. Thanks for breaking this down and trying to make an awful person look good. Not Trump, the other guy, Baghdadi. Trump is trying to destroy the man's legacy. He was a terrible, terrible person. The New York Times got no confirmation the story was made up, although I think it's fair that we can all say, yeah, Trump was probably embellishing at the very least, and probably just smearing and insulting the guy at best. But the New York Times, without evidence, absolutely the lack of evidence, has come out claiming that no one knows what he's talking about. Well, you don't know that. You don't know that. And I bring you now to another tweet. The red-headed libertarian on Twitter said, "Hi, Brian Stelter. The president had planned to speak directly to unit members. CNN has not done that because you all don't have those privileges. You dox the hell out of them. So the president's word is your available evidence, or are you calling the unit members liars?" Stelter then said this, quote, "When Trump delivered the whimpering line, many officials assumed he had spoken to some of the commandos who had carried out the raid. But as of now, the White House has not confirmed that he has done that, per CNN's reporting." My response? That is not confirmation. It's the opposite. Are you saying that this is what you're going off of to accuse the president of lying? The other sources you talked to have not yet confirmed if Trump talked to commandos? Without evidence, without confirmation, Brian Stelter ran a story accusing the president of lying. Now, here's the thing. I think it's fair to assume it was an embellishment. Fine. Absolutely. But come on, man. We know why he's doing it. Why carry water for Baghdadi? This brings me now to the terminal nature that is Trump Derangement Syndrome. The absolute need to make sure that every single thing they talk about when it comes to Trump is bad. Brings me now to a few very important stories. You can see here in my tweet, I have some graphs. I said, talk about something else. CNN is part of the maelstrom obsession that drives the cycle of Orange Man TV. Because CNN leads coverage, smaller outlets follow suit. Your president was recorded saying factual news from Politico is a conspiracy theory. You guys are losing it. Here's what happens. Stelter and others are obsessed with making sure every single thing Trump ever does needs to be talked about, needs to be negative. And it creates this whirlpool where then other smaller outlets talk about the same thing. And then Jeff Zucker, the president of CNN, reads news claiming that Ron Johnson talked about a conspiracy theory and recycles that back to his staff. Ron Johnson, my understanding, was specifically talking about a Politico report, a fact-based story from a verified, credible news source. But because all of the Orange Man bad narrative had to make sure that everything about Trump all the time is negative, they call it a conspiracy theory. Instead of Zucker fact-checking it, he eats his own waste and then vomits it back up right into the mouths of those who work for CNN on the morning phone call. And that's what we learned thanks to Project Veritas. Here's a tweet where someone said on his CNN program, Brian Stelter did a 10-minute segment on Trump's Twitter typos. Really? Well, Brian Stelter said, nope, a 4-minute segment. It's not the most important thing in the world, but accuracy does matter. Presidents should have proofreaders. Okay. Dude, I get it. But does cable television, a media report, need to talk about the typos in the president's tweets? No. But I tell you what, man, the obsession is so insane. When Trump tweeted Kafifi, yes. You know what I assumed? Somebody was writing a tweet and accidentally pressed send. It's happened to me sometimes. And then I get, now I got to delete the tweet. But because it's Trump, the unfinished tweet that said, despite negative press Kafifi, clearly they didn't finish, someone mashed some buttons and hit send on accident. Now it's a thing. It became a huge story. Everybody had to talk about it. Google employees were involved in altering things. Man, I tell you what, Trump Derangement Syndrome is something else. And I believe it's terminal. In this story from The Spectator, in reference to the American Spectator, in reference to Project Veritas's expose on CNN, they say CNN slammed by staffers. Jeff Zucker as Captain Ahab. You know the story of Moby Dick? I'm not super familiar. It's been, I was a kid when they made us read it. But the general idea is he's chasing after that white whale and he's bringing everything down around with him. In this story, they highlight all of the negative press, mostly from right-wing sources, I must admit, because why would the left criticize CNN for the most part? They do, for sure, like the far left, anti-war left. But like the media doesn't really rag on the media. Because conservative media is not really in agreement, we can see this. CNN ratings plummet April 16th. CNN loses 50% of primetime audience. April 17th, CNN's ratings drop. CNN's ratings disaster. Just how badly is CNN collapsing? CNN, MSNBC hit hard. CNN, as the network was sold recently, I believe AT&T bought it. They relocated. They bought out a bunch of staff. Now, I do think it's important to point out one thing, to be fair. These stories are selective. When the ratings drop for CNN, everybody on the right points and hollers. But when the ratings bump back up a little bit, nobody says anything. So take it with a grain of salt. CNN's ratings have been down significantly. They've gone up in certain areas. When it comes to their town halls and debates, it's been really, really bad. And they did have a buyout of many of their staffers. So we know that media is doing really, really bad outside of this. This story is one I often highlight, but it's frequently updated. 7,200 people have lost their jobs so far this year in a media landslide. Not every job lost has been orange man bad networks. But we can see that many of the networks that are the wokest, far left, anti-Trump, everything, Trump, far right, yeah, they're doing bad. Vice, Vox, their investment, I believe, Vox wrote a story saying that they believe their investment may have gone down, but I think Vox actually might be doing well. They recently bought New York Mag. But you have a ton of layoffs across digital media, and Deadspin being the latest. Splinter, which was a woke progressive political outlet, very, very anti-Trump, shut down completely. We then had Deadspin, where the owner said, stick to sports. Not interested in the political game. And what do? They all leave. Yes, I think it's fair to say Trump Derangement Syndrome is terminal. And I think I know why. It's kind of simple. People watch my channel, and I'm pretty lukewarm to negative on Trump. I'm not crazy. I don't shriek at the top of my lungs like CNN does and go, Trump's typos, wah! No, I say, look, Trump deserves credit for what happened with Baghdadi. There you go. What do you want me to say? These people are insane. You don't have to like the guy. You don't have to support him or like him to be reasonable and rational and have a regular conversation with people in media. So think about what happens. I read a story and they talk about Trump in this way, and I'm just like, I read the New York Times story, I'm just like, dude, you have no confirmation on this. Why are you reporting it? We get it. So they go around trying to disprove Trump's insult on this really awful guy? Why? Why did Brian Stelter do a 4-minute segment on the typos of the president's tweets? I really don't see the reason or the importance. You are feeding an addiction for obsessed people. I want to know what's going on with the economy, man. Okay? I want to know what's going on overseas. I do not want to be sitting here complaining about the president or, admittedly, the media. But let me show you one more data point. I'll admit, every so often we have to talk about this. This story from Real Clear Politics, measuring the media's obsession with Trump, is a fascinating case study in the absolute Trump derangement syndrome press we have today. Now, to Trump's credit, this whirlpool, he's right in the middle, floating like some crazy titan or who's the water god? Poseidon. As all of the media swarms around him and Trump raises his hands and they bend to his whim. And I wouldn't say it's all good for the president. It's certainly not good for these media companies to be trapped in this maelstrom, spiraling down out of control. Here's a chart showing mentions of Obama versus Trump. Around the same time in his presidency, Obama got substantially less press. It's so weird, isn't it? Look at that red line. Isn't that nuts? For those that are listening, the red spikes, it's a graph showing blue and red lines, and the red lines for Trump are double, triple, or even a full order of magnitude higher than Obama's. Now, around the same time in their presidency, Trump gets around double the coverage, but Obama came nowhere near the amount of coverage Trump ever got. At the peak of Obama's presidency, Trump was higher during his inauguration. Don't ask me, but I'll tell you what, man, the media is absolutely obsessed. So it's no surprise then you're seeing let me ask you something. I recently raised over $1 million for a news venture, and things have been going pretty good. We've covered a lot of things on the ground. We've got a crew that's acting, independently, doing interviews, traveling overseas, being on the ground, covering real news. You'll notice that at subverse.net, no stories about the orange man being bad. We have covered some protests, okay, but for the most part, just real news. Why is it that my ventures are doing really, really well? With great support, by the way. The people who run Subverse are not in any way, I'm not telling them what to cover and how to cover it. They're doing all that work. And my channels are growing. And I'm not particularly fond of the president. Oh, but why is that? Why are people, you know what it is? It's that people don't care if you like or don't like the president. They care if you're going to give them a fair shake. Okay? CNN, you're allowed to talk about how you don't like the president, but to do a 4-minute segment specifically on his typos, that's going to make people turn the TV off because it's irrelevant nonsense. It is not important to anybody's life. Now, don't just wait. I told you I was going to be self-critical, and I will. I'll defend myself, though. Check this out. Compared to Obama, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, it is just nuts. Looking by station, CNN spent 4.3 times more airtime on Trump than Obama, MSNBC 2.4 times, and Fox News 3.1 times. I'll give you my hypothesis. When people tune in every single day and everything you say about the president is negative, they lose trust. I think people will turn on CNN and they'll say, I don't like the president. I think he's really, really bad. And there will be Don Lemon and Jake Tapper and Brian Stelter saying, Orange man bad. And they say, yup, I thought so. But then something like Baghdadi happens. And people are like, well, you got to give him that one. But they turn on CNN and they say, Orange man bad. And then regular people who don't like Trump are going, well, come on. Like, I know, but dude, like, it's Baghdadi, man. But yeah, because they keep that through line, that even in this point, they're going to say, well, okay, Trump deserves credit, but he lied about this. People are going, what? And it brings me back to what Nate Silver said. Nate Silver is a Democrat voter. That's what he said, at least. It's amazing how libs can't even permit Trump to have one good day, and that's the break. That's where Trump Derangement Syndrome becomes truly terminal. And people say, I can't do it anymore. I can't. You turn on my channel and I'll say, like, look, I'm not a big fan of the guy. He deserves credit here, and he deserves credit for this, and criticism for this. Credit for this, criticism for this, right? You turn on CNN, it's all Trump all the time, but all bad. Always bad. Always bad. Now, people have criticized me, and so you get the point. I do want to show you one quick thing from 2017 from Farhad Manjoo. I've actually enjoyed some of his writing recently. He talks about California. But in this op-ed, he writes about how he decided to turn off Trump-related news and see what else was going on. He said, I wanted to see what I could learn about the modern news media by looking at how thoroughly Mr. Trump had subsumed it. In one way, my experiment failed. I could find almost no Trump-free part of the press. Okay, if that's the case, I know it's an anecdote. Why are all these media companies collapsing? Why 7,200 layoffs? And you can't get away from news about the president. I'll tell you what, my work's doing great. My channels are growing. We're preparing new shows. We're talking with new contributors. We're talking with old legacy, like high-profile individuals who have the chops to do great work. We're hiring people. We're traveling the world. Things are going great over here. We're not the Orange Man Bad channel, though. We're the Orange Man Not That Bad channel, right? Isn't that amazing? That my take is like, Trump is bad, but he's not that bad, right? I can be critical of him in these ways. People still watch, and I gain more and more viewership. It's so strange how that works. But this guy who can't escape the news is laying all these people off and they're collapsing. What is it? In my opinion, I believe Trump Derangement Syndrome is terminal. I believe that once you get trapped in that spiral, it's terminal. And these companies are doing the opposite of adapting. So here's what I'm doing. I have the Timcast IRL channel. I think I'll do an update for you guys later today. It's been a while, and it's youtube.com/TimcastIRL. And we're growing. We're diversifying. We're planning a show on unsolved mysteries. I'm working on it. Trust me when I say I don't take any days off and haven't had a real day off in 3+ years. And we're trying to launch this show, but there's a complicated process. I'll do an update later today. But yeah, we're growing and we're diversifying. These companies like CNN are doing the opposite. They're consolidating everything around Trump. Instead of talking about, the collapse of media and the wider industry and doing a longer segment, like dedicate a whole show to the state of the press, or do a longer show about Hong Kong or China or South America or the migrant crisis. What happened to kids in cages? What happened to the migrant caravans? The news is gone. Now they're talking about Trump typos. Wow, incredible. Well, I would be a hypocrite if I didn't address the criticisms towards me in a very similar vein. And I have many times. Omar Badar says, Tim, is it possible that your appetite for constant outrage at media criticism of Trump, even when they catch him in another lie, because that's what your followers love, isn't too different from media's relentless coverage of the president's scandals, big or petty, for traction? So I think, first, fair criticism, 100%. I will fully acknowledge, as I have in many videos, I think we're all playing a similar game. And it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we check ourselves if we get trapped in that maelstrom and pull out and talk about something else. And I have. And I fully recognize if I played the game too, I can get way more views doing other things. I mean, admittedly, I could get way more views playing Minecraft, but I don't do that because I don't care. But yeah, I could absolutely make a specific kind of content, but guess what? Here's what I said. The last video I did dedicated to the media for my main channel was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. So am I obsessed? No. Yesterday I talked about Warren and memes. And admittedly, talking about things that I think are more important and trying to make sure I don't fall into these traps results in lower viewership. That's a fact. But I try to make sure I live by my own principles and don't just I practice what I preach. I said, except I don't talk about media for every video. My last main segment on media was 2 weeks ago. I'm also not a network, and our coverage at Subverse doesn't talk about media or Trump unless it's peripheral. I am not a network like CNN, okay? Where you have every single host saying Orange Man bad. I'm a person with personal opinions doing one show. If you want to have just Don Lemon talk about Trump all the time and everyone else talks about something else, hey, that makes sense. You got one person, that's what they care about. I can respect that. But CNN is a network with Zucker on top telling everyone every day not to cover this and you must cover Trump. That's what we learned from Veritas. Somebody on this phone call said, MSNBC is doing this big town hall thing. No, talk about Trump. That's all they do. It's a big difference. I said it's why I specifically highlighted Zucker's claim to his team on the 9 a.m. call that Politico's reporting was a conspiracy. They've gone off the deep end in their obsession to make sure everything Trump does is bad in some way. By all means, I'm not perfect. I do have my own personal things I'm heavily focused on, which includes, duplicitousness from the left. I think impeachment is a scam. The media's obsession with Trump. They're not focusing on more important issues. A lot of these companies are bending over backwards for China. And yeah, I care about freedom. It's not about left or right. It's about you're doing bad. We're going to talk about it. And as I showed you in the beginning, the data shows us that to the best of my abilities, okay, I'm not perfect. The BBC, the economy is great, maybe not the greatest ever. Then why do MSNBC viewers think otherwise? I am not conservative for pointing out the BBC says the economy is doing well simply because it proves you wrong. Now, I'm not perfect. I'm not. I know it. So I'd appreciate if CNN also tried to break out of this maelstrom, because when CNN won't stop talking about Trump, then it makes all the other outlets talk about Trump. And then when I go online, all I see is Trump news. And here we are, me, making a video about the media and Trump. Isn't it fun? This is why Timcast IRL is why I wanted to do it, because I can get out and do other stories. And I do try to make sure I talk about other things. I try to talk about the biggest story. So yeah, Trump is often mentioned, the media is often mentioned, but I too try to make sure it doesn't just become this one thing is the worst thing ever, period. And all they do is talk about Trump. Well, the ratings are down. They bought out a bunch of staffers. Murmurs of layoffs circle, nonstop. 7,200 media layoffs. Woke journalists being purged from news outlets. I believe Trump Derangement Syndrome results in an obsession, an addiction, and a microscopic fringe audience. But they can't stop because they're addicted. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We'll keep the conversation going. I will see you all in the next segment at youtube.com/TimCastNews starting at 6 p.m. It is a different channel. Thanks for hanging out. I will see you all there.